We have made some critical investments in our community. Part of it, $100 million of that indebtedness, has to do with the fact that we are for the first time stepping up and honoring our obligations to our police officers and firefighters. I'm proud that we did that. We've also made some critical investments in the infrastructure of our community. Our investments in not only South Lime, but also Main and Vine Street, the Cheapside Park changes, and an assortment of other investments in our community will pay long-term dividends, and they have helped to create the environment that will sustain economic growth. Now, Vice Mayor Gray talked about how exorbitant the spending was on South Lime, yet when we put forward a proposal to reduce the cost of the contract, a change order to reduce the total cost on South Limestone, he voted against it. And so for us to go forward, there comes a point in time at which you have to make wise decisions. The South Limestone plan was something that both the community and the university had recommended for years. We had the opportunity to make it happen. We had a couple of competitive bids on that project, and I'm very proud of the connection that we now have between the University of Kentucky and our downtown area.
Okay, so I'm going to go to our next question, but first, would you say, because LFECG depends so much on the payroll tax, 83% of your revenues come from the income tax. So the more money I make, the better off the city is. Do you believe that economic development or the economic robustness, whatever word you want to use, is the number one issue?
I need to respond first to the mayor. What he said about my not voting to reduce the contract, I was consistent in my vote. I voted against South Limestone when it was over budget. I never said the project was unworthy. I said we should not spend this much. I said for 3 reasons. The process, it was shoved through, it was not fully designed, the scope was unclear, and it was wasteful. The priority, where it stood in the lineup, and the price. Those were the reasons, Jim. And I was consistent. Unlike you on the water company, where you first supported the building of the $164 million pipeline, and then you became disgusted, terribly disgusted, because they raised the rates, which anyone could predict when the project was built at $164 million.
May I? The water company, everybody knew was going to cost more money. No one ever said otherwise. The issue has always been, has the request of the water company been too much? I said it has been. You wouldn't even sign the petition I took over there. You missed the meeting before the PSC.
All right, let's move.
So for you to sit here and criticize me for my opposition to it is the height of hypocrisy. Now to go back to South Limestone. Here we had a chance to reduce the cost we were obligated to pay the contractor. You say you think that's such an outrageously expensive project, yet you voted against it. I don't understand that. I will never understand.
Your inconsistency was fully illustrated by your petition. It was so completely inadequate. So completely inadequate. The $30,000 now that you have taken from the water company interests reveal how completely inadequate your petition was. And to use the word hypocrisy, that's pretty dramatic, real dramatic.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on. I want to ask, back economic development, being proactive about it with that 15 to 20% of revenues that we do have to maybe do some things with. My world, I use Coach Calipari, if you're watching. Before you, we had a different coach, and we went to the NIT, and we all didn't like that. My whole thing is, we have all this brain power here, and we should be competing for the Final Four, metaphorically, economically. So the city of Austin, for instance, and Anthony's here, the city of Austin, Texas, we're usually maybe #1 economy in the country. 45 full-time staff on economic development inside city government and their chamber. I realize they're about 4 to 5 times bigger than us. So if you scale it down, you could say 10 people for a city the size of Lexington, full-time dedicated, and their chamber. And I realize that costs money. But as far as prioritizing economic development to pay for everything else, if we don't invest in it, it's like if we have children, we don't pay for college, they're never going to maybe get those great jobs. Do we need to beef up and invest hands-on inside city government, internalize some economic development operations? Do you believe that? And if so, what are your ideas on that?
Well, I think we do need to beef it up. And in fact, it was one of the first things we did 4 years ago. At that time, we had a small group of city employees that were charged with the responsibility of doing economic development for urban county government. Rather than continue that internal mode of doing the economic development, we proposed that we work with Commerce Lexington and the University of Kentucky so that we have a group of experienced economic development professionals who could develop the long-term relationships necessary for sustainable economic development over the long term. Now, there are probably somewhere between a half dozen and 10 folks who work on economic development projects regularly for Lexington. One has a full-time responsibility there, Anthony Wright here at Urban County Government, but there are an assortment of people at both Commerce Lexington and at the University of Kentucky who have that as their responsibility.
Do you think we should hire more people inside, underneath, in a commission level or something?
I do not, because I have seen the inner workings of urban county government.
Yeah.
I am not comfortable that those positions can be filled and maintained at the professional level they need to be. It is a
because of money, or
well, in part because of
the
the human resources structure, the civil service system, the constraints that we have to deal with.
Right.
And I think there's much more flexibility in the private sector. There's also an opportunity for people to
do you think that
build long-term relationships.
Let me get a shot at this.
Okay, go ahead. So about 1 minute for...
Well, it's not a rebuttal. It's the same question, isn't it?
Okay.
The same question is, how would you handle economic development?
Right.
Would you add staff? You don't always have to add staff in order to get better results. I had said in the Fresh Start plan that I would elevate the role of planning because it's real important in a city like ours. And I would include preservation, which we have neglected and essentially abandoned through projects like Centerpoint and the clear cutting of Centerpoint. Include preservation, planning, and economic innovation and development.
So one
That's
person,
not
like a...
Because they all connect.
Right.
They all work together. And strategically, they must be included. We must be thinking about all of these components all the time. Now, in my wheelhouse is going out and selling. I was in Toyota City before Toyota came to Kentucky. I know about selling for jobs and selling a community. That's what I've done all my life. 50 years ago, IBM landed in Lexington. 25 years ago, another inflection point, Toyota. Jobs created then, 25 years ago, were paying $25 an hour plus benefits. Today, we are celebrating jobs that are paying $10 an hour without benefits. That's not good enough. And this is why systemic changes must occur. We must look at this as a project, and we must examine ourselves and say, what can we do better? And not just say, as we have seen so often in the good old network world, we're great, we're perfect, don't tell us that we're going to change anything.
Right.
I think you guys in this community who are emerging see that and are trying to push through it. So pushing through the good old boy world is what big part of Lexington's growth and possibility represents today and for tomorrow.
Okay, so really quick point on that. That's actually the reason why this whole thing started. Was on Facebook 2.5 years ago. I asked all my high school friends, and on Facebook you can find all these old people that you haven't talked to forever. And I asked them, would you like to move back to Lexington? These people have PhDs, advanced degrees, executive level now, good jobs all across the country. And some of them have little kids now. I asked them, would you like to move back to Lexington? They almost all of them said they would love to live back because they have little kids, they're close to their grandparents. but they couldn't afford to because the jobs at the level that they're making in other cities aren't here. And so I want to ask one more time just to get a yes or no. Is economic development, because it pays for so much of the city, is it arguably at least the number one priority for the next 4 years, whoever wins?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Yes. All right. That's good.
And I think we should examine the cost structure, how much we're investing.
Okay.
I look at, for example, our company, and we work on a much thinner margin than the delta, than the difference that our budget in the government works on. And we must invest more in marketing. And so I'm looking at it and comparing and contrasting how much Lexington is investing.
Right.
And what is the strategy? How are we getting at it?
Right.
What are the results?
Right. Okay, so that, switch gears a little bit. The tax structure of Lexington, of LFUCG, 84% of our money comes from one source, the local income tax. So basically you could say all our eggs are in one basket. Do you believe, and I know this requires probably state cooperation, which might mean we have to cooperate with Louisville, which that was one of our questions, was what will we do to continue or to improve relationship with Louisville as we go forward. But do you believe that we should proactively as a city push whatever rules need to be pushed, change whatever rules, to change our tax structure so that our needs are met and we can invest more in our quality of life? And if you do believe so, if not, then that's the end of the question, I guess. If you do believe so, what steps do we need to do that? Is it Frankfurt? Is it other counties, other parts, a regional plan? How do we go about that? I totally forget who's first. You go first.
This is an issue that has come up repeatedly over the years. The proposal has always been to give cities, under state law, the ability to increase their sources of revenue through alternative taxes. Most often a sales tax has been proposed. Almost always the proposal has been you can raise your sales tax if there's a commensurate decrease in your payroll or property tax. Well, the short of it is that's not going to happen in the foreseeable future in Frankfurt. The League of Cities has worked on that proposal. It has been dead probably before its arrival in Frankfurt.
So basically it's very difficult.
Not
almost.
in the current economic and political environment. Do I foresee that happening? Certainly some deconcentration of our revenue so that we're not over-concentrated on the payroll and net profits license fee taxes would be commendable from a financial management standpoint, but it is not within the political realm of political reality right now because it would require action by the General Assembly.
So we have to have state
Yes.
approval or whatever in order for us to do anything.
Right.
And to make adjustments in the sales tax structure, we'd have to have public referendum.
Do you want to?
I don't believe in tilting at windmills. I think in this economic climate and this political climate that we have to live within our means. We have to work with what we've got.
I want to ask Chris and Tim, I want a couple more questions. Are there any questions coming on Twitter or whatever? If you would put them on the screen there, we'll ask. If you want to tweet us, we're at LeXenomics, hashtag LexMayor. We're going to take some questions. Facebook as well. I'm assuming the technology is working. One more question while I'm waiting for those is the environment. I totally subscribe to it. I think because we live in an agricultural state, and as a state we produce a lot of coal, and so that's an export to other parts of the country we can make money on. In an agricultural place that we are, with the environment being such a big thing, what role do you see environmental sustainability, the triple bottom line, environmental sustainability and economic profit, and then social good coming into play with all the brain power we have to maybe help Lexington become a driver for clean energy, biofuels, working with other regional thing, because obviously downtown is not a biofuel center, but
Well,
you can go first.
okay. I don't pretend to be a know-it-all. I didn't have to be the smartest kid in the class. What I do know is that we must, as a city, we must take leadership roles.